All right, welcome back. A quick little review here. Since it is Monday, there are only lower division matches going on. Upper division starts tomorrow. So as we get into the upper division, I'm going to be doing more reviews, including that upper division, and I'm going to be paying more attention to those upper division matches throughout the day. I'm going to be trying my best to catch any highlights and stuff for lower division matches still, so when I include them in the review, I kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about. And yeah, I'm just wanted to put it out there that for the future, I am going to be paying more attention to those upper division matches, as I do think that they, in general, are more important matches and more highly contested matches. But since it is Monday and we only have lower division matches here, I thought we'd go over some of them today. Starting off with China, which is the only region that actually had two series today. Of course, China's playing under a more compact schedule since they have only their lower division playing before Christmas. Starting off with Sparking Arrow Gaming and CDEC. This was a 2-0 for Sparking Arrow Gaming. And this was a pretty stompy series. We had this a lot today where just one team was just kind of beating the crap out of the other. It started this way and it definitely ended this way today. And yeah, Sparking Arrow Gaming, both games, just stomps all the way through for CDEC. You know, Sparking Arrow Gaming being one of those teams that coming in from the upper division, they got relegated down to the lower division. So losing to a team that's previously in the upper division, no real shame in that, but they are looking for a bounce back as they do play multiple series this week. Again, because of China's condensed schedule. The other series that took place in China was Magma versus Neptune. Of course, Neptune has 4 series this week, and they're off to an 0-1 start, so they still have plenty of time this week to get back on their feet, but starting off 0-1 never really feels good. To start, I will mention that Nevermind was standing in for Dolan position 3 for Team Neptune, which was maybe a factor in this series. However, with just how one-sided this series was as well, I doubt it really had all that much of an impact. Game 1 was an early snowball. Past like the 10-12 minute mark, it was just Magma's game, and it was just kind of kill chaining over and over. So game 1 goes to Team Magma, and then game 2 was also pretty stompy. There were some opportunities for Neptune in the mid game. They had some good fights at certain points. Maybe it looked like their roster might be able to, or their draft, I should say, looked like it could maybe come back into the game, but ultimately they just weren't able to overcome Magma once they all respawned, got map control and whatnot. So yeah, Neptune drops this series 0-2, and they're looking to improve upon their record in the next few days. Moving on to Southeast Asia, where we had Team Magma Galaxy. Of course, this is the Southeast Asian team that they have, versus 496 Gaming. And believe it or not, in Game 1, we see Meepo, which we have not seen that hero like at all the past 2 years, as Meepo hero is pretty trash right now in competitive. It seems like pretty much every team knows how to play against it, and even in a perfect Meepo game, which in the game that they drafted it was a pretty damn good Meepo game when they picked it. This game still went 50 minutes long. It was still a pretty one-sided match on the side of Team Magma, which is obviously the team that drafted the Meepo, but it did still take them 50 minutes to actually end the game. So they cheese out the first win, and then they actually have a nice game in Game 2, and Enigma showing that they're more than just a one-trick pony. They were falling behind a little bit early, 496 off to a strong start, but they come back, and all of a sudden things just fall apart for 496. Again, they had a strong start, and around the 20-minute mark, things just start falling apart, and they just start just feeding kills just over and over and over. It was that kind of scenario where it just felt like they just kept going in one at a time and dying one after another. It was a pretty brutal ending to the series, but regardless, Team Magma off to a 1-0 start this season with a 2-0 victory over 496. Looking now at Bait versus Gambit. So I talked about Bait leading up to this season about how, you know, I was hoping that they would maybe get a more impressive roster than the ones that they had in the past, especially since they lost some pretty good players this past TI roster shuffle period. And I wasn't really too impressed with the players that they picked up, but I thought, you know what, maybe these guys will have what it takes. Bait has been kind of mediocre for a long time. Maybe they'll get off to a good start. And I don't want to paint this picture that the season's over for Bait just because of the series that they did lose 2-0. But this was a series that you could definitely see the cracks in the foundation of Bait. They had a very solid start in Game 1. They actually were making some very impressive map rotations to open the map up against a Gambit draft that was very defensive heavy, tower defense heavy, and just kind of bunker down behind your tower and just hold it until your carry is strong enough to carry the game. And then the game hit 20 minutes, and it all kind of fell apart. Those map movements that they were doing to open things up, make space for the carry, just kind of stopped happening. And eventually Gambit just caught up. Their carry came online, it got too farmed, and Gambit steals that game. At least it felt like a steal, but it definitely did not feel like Gambit was really just outplaying Bait, as Bait was just not really making the moves that they likely knew that they needed to make, considering they were making them so well in the first little bit, but they just weren't able to at the end. And then in game 2, same kind of thing, strong start. This time Gambit gets off to a little bit of a better start. I wouldn't say Bait was necessarily ahead in the early game, but again, you get to this mid-game point and Bait just kind of falls apart. So again, this is a brand new roster for Bait, a lot of new members. They've only been playing together for just a couple weeks now, but you can definitely see that a lot of their training kind of falls apart past the 20-minute mark. They're pretty decent in their lanes, but past that point, they got some work to do. Again, they have another series later on this week against CIS Rejects, which is another brand new stack. They've got some big name players on that stack, and Bait's going to have to make some adjustments before they meet them for sure. Moving now to Western Europe to have Brain versus Entity, and this was one of the best series of the day. Like I'd mentioned, pretty much every series I've covered so far was a 2-0 stomp, one way or another. This one was actually a nice back and forth. Brain was likely the heavy favored team heading into this matchup. Of course, Entity, previously known as Creepwave, previously known as the old Into the Breach, were a team that kind of have been floating around the middle of the lower division for Western Europe for the past 2 tours. Whereas Brain was actually coming in from the upper division after getting relegated. They lost tiebreakers to OG and Tundra, obviously, but regardless, they still had a pretty decent looking season. They were the only team to beat Alliance in the last tour. And Entity Gaming gets off to a strong start. Not necessarily directly in game 1. Brain was actually off to a really good start in game 1. However, they just weren't quite able to close out the game. It looked very similar to the Bait game, but Entity ends up coming back and wins that one. In game 2, same kind of thing. Brain is off to a really good start, but they seem to have learned from their mistakes. They don't let it slip away from them this time. They also had a very good draft up against Entity's Medusa. It just really felt like it was an impossible game for him. It felt like every time he went into the fight, he was just dead before he could even ult, or before his ult could even stun anyone. It just was not a very good game for that. And then we had game 3, which was one of the more back and forth games of the day. It was really entertaining. You really didn't know who was going to win up until maybe the last 2-3 minutes. I'd say game 3 of this series might be my game of the day. It featured a mid Necrophos from Storm, which was a little bit questionable. I know a lot of the members on the panel were very skeptical about it until it started looking really good, and all of a sudden it looked like Entity was going to win this series. They were snowballing pretty hard, and then they just kind of went into the late game, made a few mistakes, bought back a few too many times, and eventually, ultimately, I think it was the Nature's Prophet Nullifier onto that Necrophos, which is the hardest counter item to that hero. That just ultimately won the game. The hero, Necro, could just not walk in anymore. It was impossible. So Brain steal the series. They win it 2-1. They go off 1-0 on the series season. And strong start for Brain. Again, didn't necessarily look terrible at any point in the season, except maybe the back half of game 1. But strong start for them. Now moving to North America. Again, talking about a back and forth series. However, this one a lot less, I would say, intense. This was just a kind of a weird series, honestly. Starting off in game 1, things started off pretty normal. It was a pretty close game to start. No one really pulling ahead in the lanes, but eventually, when you have a Deuce on your team, which 5-man Midas did, eventually that hero is going to come online, and there wasn't really anyone on Felt that was actually able to deal with this Medusa, and so eventually she just gets too strong, you take too much map control, and 5-man Midas wins game 1, sorry. Heading into game 2, and this was probably one of the weirdest games I've ever seen. 5-man Midas draft featured a mid sniper that rushed Bottle, Hand of Midas, Aghanim Scepter, Aghanim Shard, and then Ghost Scepter, and that is a mid sniper build. So little strange coming up for him. It almost worked. This game was back and forth for a very long time, but ultimately Felt just had way too much damage for them to deal with it. They take game 2. And then, game 3, after seeing such a fun, entertaining series up to that point, game 3, kind of a stomp in the favor of 5-man Midas. They just kind of snowballed the game right from the get-go, and there was nothing really that Felt could do. So they take that series 2-1 for 5-man Midas. They go 1-0 on the season so far. And they're looking to improve on that next week. Finally, ending things off with Infinity versus Unknown. This was probably the worst stomp of the day. Game 1 was 21-2, 21 minutes long. This was pretty brutal. Unknown, of course, coming back from the upper division after going completely winless. and this season is already off to a pretty rough start after that beatdown in the upper division last tour. And then game 2, again, another just dominant game. This one lasts a little bit longer. Unknown actually gets a few more kills. The ending score is 43-15. However, 11 of those 15 kills were just on the supports of Infinity. Yeah, don't know what else to say here. Don't have too many notes on this one. This was a very one-sided series. Infinity looking very good. So for any fans of Infinity out there, got a lot to be excited about. As for Unknown, I'm sure they had maybe a few fans given that they were in the upper division last season. What started as a terrible tour last tour is starting to look like another one here. Again, it's just the first series of this tour, but again, Unknown with a pretty terrible start, the worst one of the day, like I mentioned. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I'm going to be having a review posted up every single day that there are DPC matches. Of course, like I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm going to be putting more focus on the upper division matches when it comes to actually watching live. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow with another video.